We all know the pharaohs, the ancient dynasties of ancient Egypt. When we think of a pharaoh, we think of Tutankhamun, of his funerary mask. We think of the pyramids, we think of the Sphinx. Maybe we even think of some heretic pharaoh, like Amenhotep IV, who established the monotheistic cult of the solar disk Ra. Or we think of the passion for cats, which were sacred in ancient Egypt. We think of the Nile as the bringer of life. But not only that, in short, we think of all of ancient history. But when, on October 6th, 1981, in Cairo, in modern Egypt, the cry goes up, "I have killed the pharaoh." Well, isn't that the cry of a madman who went to destroy some mummies at the Museum of Ancient Egypt? It's the cry of an artillery lieutenant who has just carried out a terrible attack. An attack not against a pharaoh of antiquity, but against a president who had been a statesman, sorry for the play on word, balancing between modernity and absolutism, between the desire for openness and the desire for closure, between policies that sometimes contradicted each other, and who had paid with his life for two choices that went against the trend set by his predecessor, choices that ultimately clashed and led to that very attack. Today we're talking about Anwar Al-Sadat. What are you waiting for? Try this service. October 6, 1981, Cairo, the capital of Egypt. A big parade is taking place, a celebratory parade. It's the anniversary of the crossing of the Suez Canal during the Yom Kippur War, 8 years earlier, at the height of the most difficult period in the Middle East, at least in the 20th century. The joint forces of Egypt and Syria had launched a surprise attack against Israel right during the religious holiday of Yom Kippur. Anwar el-Sadat, the president of Egypt, the successor of Nasser, had become for the Arab world the hero of Yom Kippur, or even better, the hero of the crossing of the Suez Canal. This is because the Sinai, since 1967, since the end of the Six-Day War, had been militarily occupied by Israel with an incredible maneuver. The Egyptian army managed to take back the Sinai, at least temporarily, throwing the IDF into crisis. The subsequent reaction of the IDF led to a stalemate, which was later confirmed by the peace settlement, thanks also to the mediation of the great powers. But Sadat, at least at that time and until 1977, he would have been seen by the Islamic world and the Arab world as a sort of political and military hero. Then everything would change, leading up to those situations. In October 1981, when an artillery lieutenant, a man who was born and lived in the shadow of two Egyptian institutions. One, the Egyptian army, the other, more recent, Islamic Jihad, had decided to make an attempt on the president's life. That man, that officer, who had decided to carry out such a radical act was a man named Khalid al-Islambouli, an officer only 26 years old. Coming from a deeply religious family, his younger brother had already been arrested several times for propaganda in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he had seen Sadat first as a hero and then as a deep disappointment, even a traitor to the Arab cause and the Palestinian cause. For what reason? Because Sadat, who had succeeded Nasser in the autumn of 1970, after the president died of a heart attack, had changed his vision, had changed his policy, had radically changed Egypt, not only in domestic matters, starting a so-called second phase of the revolution, theoretically opening up to multi-party politics, softening his stance towards religious institutions and political religious associations, allowing for neoliberalism, a free market, and an opening to Western companies. Sadat also had other ideas, including this one, to split the Arab front, which until then had been, despite some differences, fairly united, and he was the first to organize a trip to Jerusalem in 1977, and the following year to accept the peace talks at Camp David at the presidential residence in the United States, together with Menachem Begin, his Israeli counterpart, and to reach a peace agreement. All of this caused a shock within the Arab world, a powerful shock, a shock that was hard to digest for many. But why did Sadat do it? Maybe we should then retrace the life of Anwar el-Sadat himself, the son of a Nubian family, so a minority ethnic group in Egypt, destined for a military career within the School of Communications. During World War II, he was arrested by the British because he was accused of being part of a clandestine network of saboteurs who were trying to expel the. After World War II, Sadat rose through the ranks in the Egyptian army, and within the army he met Gamal Abdel Nasser, his mentor, the man with whom, together with a third person, another officer, General Mohammed Naguib, he would lead the coup that would result in the dethronement of King Farouk I. It was Sadat himself, on that day in 1952, who took over the Egyptian national radio station and read into the microphone the proclamation of the free officers announcing the fall of the monarchy, the flight of Farouk abroad, and the birth of a new Egypt. When Naguib was later deposed by Nasser, Sadat became an even closer collaborator of the president. He had served as president of the National Assembly twice, and in December 1969, he became Nasser's vice president. When Nasser died from a heart attack caused by extreme stress while trying to bring peace in Transjordan between King Hussein and the Palestinian fighters during Black September. Well, the succession could only go to Sadat. Sadat, who in a short time began to radically change Egypt. Within a few months, on May 15, 1971, there was a purge of the most hardline Nasserists, the nationalists most nostalgic for the old leader. From there began a second phase, called the Corrective Revolution. Referring back to the revolution of the free officers in 1952, Sadat wanted to improve Egypt. How? First of all, by eliminating those elements of rigid statism, almost Soviet style, that had characterized the period of Nasser. The next move was the opening to the free market, and therefore to large foreign companies. This was called the infita phase, the opening. The possibility for large foreign groups to invest in Egypt, in tourism, but also in industry, giving a strong boost to the country and sharing in its wealth. Sadat had also given other signals on the political front. At least in theory, he had abolished the one-party system. However, the Arab Socialist Union remained, which was the quintessential Nasserist party. But in theory, other parties could also have competed for parliament and contributed to the country's political makeup. But Sadat's idea was more oriented toward conservative groups, especially Islamist ones, which had been harshly repressed by Nasser, who saw a danger in the Muslim Brotherhood, and instead had gained new momentum through Sadat, who thought of using the Muslim Brotherhood to control students at the university and to fight the more progressive front, the one that most supported the Palestinian cause. All this won him support in some quarters and hostility in others. Yet Sadat also proved to be skilled at political maneuvering beyond his own country. For example, seeking a new Arab unity, no longer a united Arab republic, which had failed years earlier and had been proposed by Nasser, but rather a federation that would include Syria and Libya, a project that was destined to fail, since Gaddafi on one side and Assad on the other criticized Sadat's pro-American stance. There would even be a border war between Libya and Egypt in 1977, a significant problem for someone who until then had positioned himself as a possible leader of the entire Arab and Maghreb world. But Sadat was also an interventionist when it came to weapons, for example, supporting Mobutu or Somalia in the Ogaden War, or in foreign policy, by hosting Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who in January 1979 had been forced to leave Iran after the Khomeinist revolution. In Cairo, Reza Pahlavi had found refuge and understanding before going to the United States in a last-ditch attempt to find a cure for the cancer that was eating him alive. Sadat was like this, a man who negotiated on multiple fronts, who managed several issues at the same time, and who, even though he seemed cold and calculating, often tried his luck and took risks, as he did in 1977 with his official visit to Jerusalem, the first by an Arab leader, something that would shock the entire Muslim world. Nothing like that had ever happened before. The Camp David Accords of 1978, the Israeli-Egyptian Peace Treaty of 1979, the Return of Sinai, were historic steps that brought peace to the region, ending hostilities in the Sinai area, which earned Sadat and Begin the 1978 Nobel Peace Prize. These steps had been welcomed by Egyptian public opinion, but had also drawn a great deal of criticism, first and foremost from those very Islamic fundamentalists, specifically from the Muslim Brotherhood, that Sadat had legitimized in Egypt. Even the progressive leftist forces were increasingly opposing Sadat because the Camp David Accords were seen as abandonment of the Palestinians to their fate. This could not be forgiven. This could not be tolerated. But Sadat had reacted firmly and even brutally, worsening the situation in Egypt, removing several opportunities for criticism, resorting to repression, even military repression, in the streets to confront every protest, from those against the policy of containing public spending, a necessary step, up to the so-called bread riots. Sadat had also decided to dissolve the Nasserist Party, the Arab Socialist Union, creating in its place another party, the National Democratic Party, less biased toward the Soviet Union, and more centralist, more moderate, more accustomed to negotiating with almost all the other parties. That wasn't enough. Sadat viewed with increasing suspicion, after having advocated for years the possibility of opening up to other religious beliefs, the various protest initiatives carried out both by Islamic organizations and by Coptic Christian ones, to the point that even the primate of the Coptic Church at the time, Shenouda III, was forced into exile. Even university students were subjected to hundreds and hundreds of arrests because they were suspected not only of being opponents of Sadat, but even of being aspiring terrorists. What Sadat would never, ever have expected, what he would never have suspected, is that his worst enemies were within the very army from which he himself had emerged, together with Nasser. He could not have imagined that the Egyptian Islamic Jihad was planning his assassination. And when, on the very day of his triumph, October 6, 1981, Sadat had underestimated the threats from the jihadists. He had even dismissed Arafat's words with a smile when he said, "Let them sign whatever they want. There will be no peace anyway, and whoever signs will fall." For all this, Sadat had reserved words of mockery and condescending smiles, not to mention further ridicule. The Islamists, who had benefited from the so-called rectification policy and had therefore been released from prison, had engaged in proselytism. And from that moment on, they looked at Sadat's initiatives first critically and then with growing hostility, starting with his trip to Jerusalem in 1977. Those 3 years in which Sadat decided to get closer and closer to the United States and Israel were seen by the Islamists as a betrayal. One of these Islamists is an officer, a lieutenant in the artillery. His name is Khalid al-Islambouli. He is one of the sons of the New Egypt. He was born in 1955. He was born after the Nasserist Revolution. He was born in the governorate of Minya. His father was a legal consultant. His mother is of Turkish origin. She followed her husband to the governorate, agreeing to raise their children in the Islamic faith, at first in a moderate way, and later in a more radical way. Al-Islambouli received his first field command in March 1980 as a platoon commander in the 116th Field Artillery Brigade based in Cairo. And already in that year, Al-Islambouli had begun to strongly hate President Sadat. He considered him weak, a collaborator with Israel, a traitor, and he had to pay. Sometimes fate punishes those who decide to make an attempt on a president's life. Other times it rewards them. That's exactly the case with Al-Islambouli. That day, the day of the October 6th parade, Al-Islambouli shouldn't have been on board one of the trucks in the procession, those trucks towing the artillery howitzers. He should have been at the barracks, serving as the officer on duty. Fate decides otherwise. The officer who was supposed to lead the platoon during the parade falls ill. It's food poisoning. He can't command those men. He can't lead them in the parade. In his place, Al-Islambuli and his subordinates are sent to lead the platoon of the 133rd Artillery Battalion. Al-Islambuli has already organized everything. He managed to smuggle in some ammunition, despite the parade rules stating that all weapons must be unloaded, and to hide 3 grenades inside his helmet. When it's time to get on the truck, he hides the ammunition for himself and his 3 accomplices, soldiers who are loyal to him, and hides the grenades in a field box. He gets on the vehicle, which is supposed to parade in the middle of the procession after the Soviet tanks. On the platform with Sadat are Vice President Hosni Mubarak, military attachés from other Arab countries, and ambassadors from many countries, as well as religious figures, both Islamic and Coptic. Al-Islambuli has only one objective: Sadat, codename Pharaoh. He is the one who must be killed. When the truck towing the artillery piece, with Islambuli on board, approaches the platform, Islambuli himself grabs his service revolver and orders the driver to stop. Either you stop, or I'll blow your brains out. Frightened, the driver stops in the middle. From there, Islambuli and 3 other accomplices get out, all with weapons in hand. At first, no one pays attention, because it is customary in Arab world parades for at least one officer from each branch, from each unit, to go and pay direct respects to the authorities stand. Everyone thinks it's simply a ritual act. In reality, it's something unplanned, and it's clear that it's not a tribute. When Ali Islambuli takes off the helmet under which he hid those grenades he took from the truck's box and starts throwing them toward the platform, 2 of the grenades don't explode. A 3rd one injures Sadat and many other people near him. Ali Islambuli's men raise their AK-47s and start shooting. Ali Islambuli himself rushes onto the platform. He climbs onto it and shoots directly at Sadat and those around him. The inferno lasts less than 3 minutes. The massacre is complete. Ali Islambuli shouts, "I killed the Pharaoh." He didn't just kill him. He killed many other people along with him. There are 11 dead. They also include the military attaché from Oman, the Coptic Orthodox Bishop Anwar Samuel, the Cuban ambassador to Egypt, a Chinese engineer Zhang Baiyu, and the presidential photographer. Ali Islambuli is immediately arrested, along with his accomplices, and taken to prison. The following spring, the trial takes place, ending with a conviction and the death penalty. Ali Islambuli is executed by a firing squad on April 15, 1982. During the trial, he defended himself by asserting his right as a man, as an Egyptian, and as an officer to react to a betrayal of his people. But no one was willing to believe him. None of the judges thought that justification, that motivation, could have any basis. In place of Anwar Sadat, his former deputy, Hosni Mubarak, who was wounded in the attack, is now in charge. But he survived. Mubarak would rule for another 30 years until another revolution. Ali Islambuli's brother would escape to Afghanistan, where he would first go to fight with the Mujahideen and then join the ranks of the Taliban. Even today, it is not exactly known what happened to Khalid Ali Islambuli's younger brother. All trace of him has been lost. But what remains is that strong and powerful cry that echoes on that stage in Cairo: "I killed the Pharaoh." As if it were a regicide, as if it were the killing of a tyrant, nothing more. What remains of Ali Islambuli? We've said it. What remains of Anwar Sadat? It's the memory of a president who, as we've said, played on several fronts, taking risks that in part paid off in the end, and in part cost him his life. What remains is the memory of a man who, coming from a complex situation, was able to interpret the changing times with remarkable perception, seeing before others the need for peace in the Middle Eastern region, finding a balance, the balance achieved at Camp David, a balance that would have allowed Egypt to recover its territory, the Sinai, and that would have pacified the entire border. The historical judgment on Sadat is quite controversial. It's difficult to reconcile his image as a man of peace with his image as an authoritarian president who limits freedom of expression. It's difficult to reconcile the historical memory of having been not only Nasser's deputy, but also the man who started the Yom Kippur War. with the image of a peaceful man, a man who wants tranquility, who wants coexistence. It's difficult to reconcile the idea of a politician who pursued the desire for full religious expression in his own country with the fact that he was killed by the same Muslim Brotherhood and the same Islamic Jihad that he had protected, encouraged, and released from prison. It's very difficult to understand exactly who Anwar al-Sadat was. Of course, that phrase, al-Islam, Islambuli, I killed the pharaoh, it's hard to forget, but maybe it's better to remember. Sadat on the lawn at Camp David, together with Begin, together with Jimmy Carter, while they try to reshape the Middle East with the utopia of peace. Compared to remembering a Sadat in uniform while ordering the Yom Kippur War, the attack on Israel, or while authorizing the repression of students. The fact is that in the delicate and balanced game of the Cold War within the Middle East, a man like Sadat is hard to categorize. And it's hard to imagine that without him. Egypt would have had a certain historical turning point. It would have peacefully regained the Sinai, and, above all, it would have become that country open to the West and open to dialogue, which is, in some ways, with many caveats, even today. You can find me here again on Inside History, the channel for those who love contemporary history, for those who have known us for a long time. I practically don't have to say anything. But if it's your first time, or one of the first times you're on our channel, well, know that in addition to the YouTube channel, there is a podcast platform that you can find on the major dedicated online platforms. And in addition to this, there is an official Inside History website where you can find the channel, the podcast, our articles, our in-depth analyses, our editorials, and 2 exclusive areas. One dedicated to our fan shop, where you can find, among other things, the Apollo that I'm wearing, and the other where you can request our exclusive monthly newsletter, completely free of charge. It's a service we've designed for you, which arrives at the beginning of every month in your email inboxes, with lots and lots and lots of things, lots of content, our reading recommendations, suggestions for movies or TV series to watch, our timelines, our editorials, our stories, and much more. You can request it at any time, and rest assured that at the beginning of every month, a nice message from Dentro La Storia will arrive in your email inbox.